Good morning. Today we'll make a note-taking app using the MERN stack, MongoDB, Express, React and Node.js, and this app will allow us to create, read, update and delete those nodes in our application. Here is what we're going to build. There is a to-do list. We can create new to-dos, text, hello to-do list, save to-do. It will be added to this list. We can add a bunch of other to-dos, foo, create to-do bar. Then we can go to the list and edit the to-dos. Bar will now be buzz, save to do, and it will be saved. So let's create this application. I begin by creating a new React application called the MERN CRUD. npx create React app MERN CRUD. After it's done, I go to this folder cd MERN CRUD and install the dependencies. We will need Bootstrap, yarn add Bootstrap, and React hook form to handle the forms in this application. React hook form. Now let's open the code editor, go to src, then go to index.js and import Bootstrap to enable the CSS styles. We'll also need to install React Router DOM. Let's do it. Yarn add React Router DOM. After it's done, we can wrap our application into browser router that we import from React Router DOM. Now let's go to app.js, remove the layout. We don't need app CSS either, and let's define the routes that we'll have in our application. So we'll wrap everything into a switch, and inside of it we'll have 3 routes. First route will be handling the route path. It should be exact, otherwise it will match all other routes as well, because it's just a slash, and all the routes will contain the slash in their URL, and it will render the component called to-dos list. We'll need another route to handle the editing of the to-dos, edit, and then ID. The component will be edit to-do, and another one to create new to-dos, and the component will be create to-do. Now let's wrap our switch into a div and add a header that will contain the links to our pages: to-do list, edit to-do, and create to-do. Div, class name navbar. Actually, let's use nav instead of div, and let's add a bunch of other class names to our top level nav, which will be our header. Let's use bg light, navbar expand lg, and navbar light. Now let's define the navigation links. We'll use the top level unordered list with list items for each link. I'll create the first one with the link to the root, and it will have the text to-dos. Now the wrapping URL should have class name navbar nav and mr auto. List items should have class names navbar item, and the link should have the class name navlink. Let's import the link from the React Router DOM. Let's copy the list item with the link and change the to create and text to create to do. We're done with the header. Now we can define the page components. Create new file for the to-do list, to-do list.js, import React from React, export const to-do list equals a function that will return a div with class name container, and inside of this container for now we'll just write to-do list. Copy this file, paste it, and now rename it to edit to do. Rename the component inside edit to do, and it should return a different text, edit to do item. Repeat it for the create to do item component. copy, paste, rename, create to do, rename the component, create to do, and change the text to create to do item. Go to app.js and import the newly created components. Import to do list from to do list, import create to do from create to do, and import edit to do from edit to do. Let's remove the test for now, and let's launch the app to make sure that it works. Run yarn start, go to the browser and make sure you can navigate between to-do list and create to-do item pages. Go to create to-do component and let's create the create to-do form that will allow us to create the new to-do items. We'll need React hook form, so import use form from React hook form. Now inside of this container we'll have another div with class name mt3 to add some top margin. We'll wrap the create to do item into h3, it will be our header, h3. And now below the header we'll define the form, and inside of the form we define a div that will be our form group, class name form group. It will hold the label and the input for the text of our to-do item. Let's define the label. The label should say text. It should have HTML4 text, because this will be the name of our input field, and ID as well. Now we define the input, type text, name text, ID also text. Now below that we define another form group that will hold our submit button. Let's call it class name form group, and inside of it a button with text create to do, class name btn primary. We also need to set the type to submit and format the document. Now we can call the use form to get the register and handle submit callback equals use form. Now we can define the on submit handler. It will be handle submit, and we pass a callback to it where we get the data. It will return an object where the keys of this object will be the names of the fields of our form, and the values will be the input values. So we can alert them using JSON stringify data, and we pass this on submit to on submit handler of our form on submit. We also need to pass the register to the input as a ref. If we would have more inputs, then we would just pass this register item to each of the inputs as their ref field. You don't need to call the use form multiple times. Let's format the document, and let's also define the class name of our input element to be form control. Now let's go to the browser and you should see the following picture. You should be able to enter some value into the to-do item, press create to do, and you should see the alert message with the text and then whatever message you've entered. Let's also add the redirect to the to-dos list after we submit a new to-do item. To do this, we import use history from React router DOM. Let's define history equals use history. And now after we alert the data, we call history push root. Let's go to the app. Let's try to create another to-do item. Press create. OK. And now you're redirected to the root page. Let's make the list layout for our to-dos. Go to to-do list. And first update the layout. We'll wrap our component into another div with class name mt3. Format the document. It will be our header h3 to do space list. Now below the header we'll have a table, class name table, table striped mt3 to create a margin between the header and the table. Let's close the table, format it, and inside of it let's define the table header, t-head. Inside of this t-head we define a table row. Inside of the table row we define two table cells, table header text and table header action. Now let's define the table body. T-body will contain the list of our items and we'll need to fetch them. To do this, we'll define a state, const items, set items equals use state. We'll import it from React, use state. We'll also need use effect to fetch the items. For now, we'll just hardcode the values for the items, but later we'll use the same use effect to actually fetch them from our API. Use effect, then we pass the callback that will be executed when we mount the component. We pass an empty array so that it is run only once, and here we set items to be an array. By the way, the items by default should be an empty array, and we set them to an array of items which will be objects with field text, for example foo, and ID, for example 0. And let's add two more items, foo bar buzz 1 and 2. Now let's map through items map to do, and we return a table row. Don't forget to specify the key. It should be a unique value. In our case, it will be the ID of our item, to do ID. Otherwise, React wouldn't know which item corresponds to which element and will make unnecessary re-renders. Now we render td with to-do text and another td with a link that says edit, and it leads to edit and then item ID, to do ID. Let's import the link from React Router DOM. Import link from React Router DOM. Now go to the browser. You should see the list of our items. It should be rendered as a table with striped rows. And if you click on any of the edit links, you should go to the edit to do item page. Let's create this page now. Edit to do page should look almost exactly like create to do, but it should preload the to do item data. In our case, only one field, to do item text. So I'm gonna go to create to do, copy the layout, go back to edit to do, paste it here, rename it to edit to do, rename the header, edit to do item, and now we want to define the to do, const to do set to do equals use state, import it from React, use state. We also will need the use effect to preload the to do. Now we pass the options object to use form because we need to pass the default values. In our case, default values should be an object with field text, and it will be to do. If it exists, then to do text, otherwise empty string. Format the document. And now let's create the use effect. Use effect, we pass a callback, we pass an empty array as dependencies because we want it to run only on component mount. Now inside of this use effect we call set to do, and for now let's hardcode the value. It will be text foo. The problem of this approach is that it won't work like this. If you open the browser, you'll see that we still don't have the default value. That's because we cannot specify default values multiple times, like it will happen if we update the to-do. So it will always use the initial value of the to-do const. It will check that it doesn't exist, so we use the empty string as the default value for the text field. How do we fix it? We will move our layout to a new component that will be called to-do form.js. Import React from React, export const to do form equals a new component. This approach will actually also fix the code duplication that we'll have because edit to do and create to do have the same layout. So let's go to edit to do, copy the layout, paste it into the to-do form, go back, copy the use form definition, use history, use effect, and use submit, paste it into to-do form. We'll need to accept the to-do from the props. Now we can remove this use effect because instead of it we will use the data from the props. Copy the imports and we should be all set. We can now use to-do form inside of the edit to-do component. Return to-do form. We can pass the to-do. We'll use our state to do it. And let's close the curly bracket. We don't need use form and use history anymore, but we need to import our to-do form component from to-do form. Also inside edit to-do, we will now check if to-do exists. Then we render the to-do form. Otherwise, we render a div that says loading. If you now open the app in the browser, you'll see that we preload the form value. Go back to the code and let's move the header and container out of the form. Copy it and paste it into the layout. We'll need two closing divs. Format the document, and we can remove the closing divs from the form component. Now let's add another prop on submit. So we'll be able to specify the onSubmit function from the outside of the to-do form. Rename our internal onSubmit to submit handler, so we don't have name collisions. Pass submit handler to onSubmit handler of the form. And now instead of calling alert JSON stringified data, we will call onSubmit data. Now we can go to edit to do, create the onSubmit handler that will accept the data. It will call alert JSON stringify data, and we'll pass it as a prop to our to-do form. OnSubmit equals onSubmit. And we can also use the to-do form inside of the create to-do component. Let's copy it, go to create to-do, remove the form, use our to-do form component instead. Let's import it from to-do form. Now we don't need to use the use form and history, and we only need to alert the values in our onSubmit handler. As we create a new item, we don't need to pass the default values anymore. Format the document, remove the unused imports, go to the browser, and when you click create to do, it should render the form. You should be able to enter the new value, create to do, see the alert, then it should redirect it to the to-do list, click edit, and you should be on the edit to do item. And if you click create to do, it should redirect you back to the to-dos list. Problem with edit to do item submit button is that it says create to do. Let's rename it to something more neutral, like save to do. And now it fits both the edit and create page. You could also accept the submit button value through the props if you want to, but in our case, I think it's fine if we just call it save to do. Okay, at this point our frontend part works, so we can start working on our backend. Inside of the project, create a new folder and make dir backend. Go to this folder, initialize the new npm package npm init -y, and now let's install the dependencies. We'll need to install Express, yarn add Express, course, and Mongoose to work with MongoDB. Now let's go to this folder, cd. Now let's open it in the editor. Create a new file called server.js. And now inside of this file we import Express equals require Express. We need to create an app, const app equals Express. We also need to import course. Course equals require course. And we need to define the port. Port equals 4000. Now, after we've initialized the app, we call app use course, app use express JSON. We do it to be able to parse HTTP requests bodies as JSON. Then we call app listen port, and then we pass a callback where we console log server is running on port plus port. After your server is ready, you need to install MongoDB. You can do it using the instructions on MongoDB documentation site. If you use Mac, you can just run brew install Mongo, or you can use Docker. To do it, you can run docker run Mongo using the Mongo image from Docker Hub. I already have Mongo running locally, so if you will need to run it, then either use one of the instructions on the documentation page, the link will be in the description, or use the Docker image. I will post a link in the description of this video as well. Go back to server.js, import Mongoose, const Mongoose equals require Mongoose. Now we connect to our local Mongo instance. Mongoose connect MongoDB 127.0.0.1 27.0.17 /todos. Todos is the name of our database. We pass an options object with the use new URL parser true. Now Mongoose connection once open, we will log a message. Console log MongoDB connection established successfully. Now we need to create a model for our to-do items. Create a new folder inside of the backend folder called models. Inside of this folder, create a new file called todo.js. Here you also need to import Mongoose. Const Mongoose equals require Mongoose. Now we define the to-do model equals Mongoose schema, and we pass the form of this schema. It will have only one field called text of type string. Now we export the model. Module exports equals Mongoose model to-do to-do. Now we can define the routes. Go back to server.js. Below the course and JSON middlewares, let's define our first route. First we'll handle getting the list of the to-do items. Get slash is a function that accepts request, response, and inside of it we call to-do, and we need to import it. Const to-do equals require models to-do. We call to-do, find, and we pass a callback function there that accepts error and to-dos, and if we got an error, then we log it. Otherwise, we respond with JSON of these to-dos. Now let's define the handler to create new to-do items. App post, it will be a post request handler. Create request response. Inside of it we create new to-do object using new to-do request body, and then we call to-do save, then we get the to-do. If everything went correctly, then we pass response JSON to-do. Otherwise, if we catch some error, then we respond with status 500 and we send error message. Format the document. Now let's add one last route that will allow us to get specific to-do item. App get ID request response callback const ID equals request params ID to-do find by ID and then we pass a callback that will receive error and to-do, and will respond with JSON and to-do object. Now let's run our server and test it using some curl requests. Node server.js, and now in a separate tab we'll call curl with header content type application JSON request post with data text should be test, and the endpoint should be localhost 4000 create. Don't worry, I will add this text, this curl request, to the video description, so you will be able to test your application as well. Let's call it. We get created to-do item as a response. It means that everything worked correctly, and now we can request the list of the to-do items. Let's just curl http localhost 4000. By default it will be a GET request, and we get an array with one item, which is the to-do item that we just created. Now let's copy the ID, make another GET request with this ID, and we get the correct item. So everything works, and we can now connect the backend with our client. First, go to to-do list, and instead of loading the hard-coded data, let's actually load it from our backend. Let's define the API module, new file, api.js, export const get to-dos equals a function that returns fetch http localhost 4000, then response JSON. Now in the to-do list we import get to-dos from API, and now we create a fetch items inline function that is async arrow function, where we'll get the to-dos using the get to-dos method. We use await, and after we have the to-dos we call set items to-dos. We can remove the previous set items call, and now we call this fetch items function. We created this additional async function so that we wouldn't have to make the whole useEffect callback asynchronous, because it's not recommended. If you open the browser, you should see our test item in the list. Next, let's implement creating the to-do items. Let's go to api.js, export const create to-do equals a function. It receives the to-do as an argument, and then it calls fetch http localhost 4000 endpoint create, and then we pass the options. Method should be post, headers should be accept application JSON, and content type also application JSON. And finally we can pass the body. Body should be JSON stringify to do. Now we can go to create to do, and instead of calling alert, we're gonna call create to do from the API module, and we pass data to it as arguments. Let's go to the browser, create to do, let's create some random text, save item, and if we go to to-do list, we should see the newly created to do there. Right now there is a problem. If we post a to do and then go to the list, first time it won't have this updated to do there, because we navigated to this endpoint before the server could process the data. So we have to reload the page to see this new item in the list. We can fix it if we go to to-do form, remove the history push from the submit handler, then go to create to do, make this onSubmit function asynchronous. Now we await for create to do. We define the history, const history equals use history, and after we created the to-do, after we got the reply from the response from the server, we call history push root route. If you go to the browser, then go to create to do, create some random to do, and then navigate to the root route, then we see the list already updated. One last thing is to let the user edit the items. Let's go to edit to do, and here we'll need to use another hook, const match equals use route match, and then inside of the useEffect we'll need to call the API method that we'll need to define. That is export const get to do. We pass an ID there, fetch http localhost 4000 ID. This should be a template string, and then response JSON. Let's go back to edit to do. Here we define a new function, fetch to do equals async function that we define and then immediately call, and inside of it we get the to do, calling the get to do from the API module, passing the ID that we get from the match params ID. After we got the to do using await, we call set to do to this to do constant. We also need to go to to-do list, and instead of using just ID, we need to use the underscore ID. Let's go to the browser, click edit. As you can see, we have successfully preloaded the data for our to-do item, But to be able to edit it, we need another route handler. Let's go back to the backend, server.js, define another route. It will be post :id. Let's remove the code from the previous method. Now we need to find the to-do, find by ID, then we pass a callback, error, and to-do, and then if no to-do, then we respond with status 404, send to-do not found. Otherwise, we set to-do text to be request body text. Then we call to-do save, and then after we saved it, we call a callback where we respond with JSON. Respond JSON to do. Let's add a catch method that will receive an error, and then response with status 500 and text error message. Format the document. Now go back to edit to do, or rather API.js. Copy the create to do and name and call it update to do. Change the URL so that it calls ID but with post. Go to edit to do. Instead of alerting the data, we'll now do the same as we do in the create to do. Let's copy this code. Make the onSubmit function asynchronous. Now we await update to do. We import it from the API. Now we need the history object. Let's copy it from the create to do and add to the hooks list. And update to do should also receive the ID that it will append to the URL. And the URL should be a template string. Now inside of the edit to do, we call update to do with match params ID. Now if we go to the browser and edit some to do item, let's rename it to edited item, save to do, and as you can see now this item is called edited item, so the editing also works. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what else would you like to know about Node.js or maybe React, and also subscribe to my channel and join my Discord server to pick the topics for the next videos. See you next time.